All Summer in a Day by Ray Bradbury. Read with, I guess, classroom commentary by Harold Delaney. Mr. Delaney. Whatever. You know who I am. Ready? Ready. Now? Soon. Do scientists really know? Will it happen today? Look. See for yourself. The children pressed to each other like so many little roses, so many weeds, intermixed, peering out for a look at the hidden sun. It rained. It had been raining for 7 years, thousands upon thousands of days, compounded and filled from one end to the other with rain, with a drum and gust of water, with the sweet crystal fall of showers, and the concussion of storms so heavy they were tidal waves come over the islands. 1,000 forests had been crushed under the rain and grown up 1,000 times to be crushed again. And this was the way life was forever on planet Venus. And this was the schoolroom of the children of the rocket men and women who had come to a raining world to set up a civilization and live out their lives. That is the setup and the setting for Ray Bradbury's classic short story of A Summer in a Day. It gives you, instantaneously, before you know anything else, it gives you what the setting is. It tells you that there's going to be people invested. It tells you there are children invested, waiting for this concept of the sun and the summer. It has been raining. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, look for the hidden sun. It has been raining for 7 years. I think we can all understand today what it might feel like for us to kind of see or feel the concepts presented here. It's stopping. It's stopping. Yes. Margot stood apart from them, from these children who could ever remember a time where there wasn't rain and rain and rain. They were all 9 years old. If there had been a day 7 years ago when the sun had come out for an hour and showed its face to the stunned world, they could not recall. Sometimes, at night, she heard them stir in remembrance, and she knew they were dreaming and remembering gold or a yellow crayon or a coin large enough to buy the world with. She knew that they would remember the warmness, like a blushing in the face, in the body, in the arms and legs and trembling hands. But then they always awoke to the tattling drum, the endless shaking down of clear bead necklaces upon the roof, the walk, the gardens, the forests, and their dreams were gone. All day yesterday, they had read in class about the sun, about how like a lemon it was and how hot, and they had written small stories or essays or poems about it. I think the sun is a flower that blooms for just 1 hour. That was Margot's poem, read in a quiet voice in the still classroom while the rain was still falling outside. "Aw, you didn't write that," protested one of the boys. "I did," said Margot. "I did." "William," said the teacher. But that was yesterday. Now the rain was slackening, and the children were crushed in the great thick windows. "Where's teacher?" "She'll be back." "She'd better hurry, we'll miss it." They turned on themselves like a feverish wheel, all tumbling spokes. Margot stood alone. She was a very frail girl who looked as if she had been lost in the rain for years, and the rain had washed out the blue from her eyes, and the red from her mouth, and the yellow from her hair. She was an old photograph dusted from an album, whitened away. And if she spoke at all, her voice would be a ghost. Now she stood, separate, staring at the rain and the loud, wet world beyond the huge glass. "What are you looking at?" said William. Margot said nothing. "Speak when you're spoken to." He gave her a shove. But she did not move. Rather, she let herself be moved only by him and nothing else. They edged away from her. They would not look at her. She felt them go away. And this was because she would play no games with them in the echoing tunnels of the underground city. If they tagged her and ran, she stood blinking after them and did not follow. When the class sang songs about happiness and life and games, her lips barely moved. Only when they sang about the sun and the summer did her lips move as she watched the drenched windows. And then, of course, the biggest crime of all was that she had come here only 5 years ago from Earth, and she remembered the sun, and the way the sun was, and the sky when she was 4 in Ohio. And they had been on Venus all their lives. And they had been only 2 years old when the last sun came out, and had long since forgotten the color and the heat of it, and the way it really was. We are presented here with a difference, maybe with a reason. That all depends on how we see it. Margot, by being the only girl who has truly seen the sun, by being the only person who truly understands what they've lost, Margot is set aside from the rest of the school and the rest of the classrooms. Arguably, she's set aside from even possibly the teacher, if they only saw the sun for a short amount of time every 7 years. But the kids all treat her like she's a pariah, like she's something to be avoided or pushed or hated. And it's jealousy. But Margot remembered. "It's like a penny," she said once, eyes closed. "No, it's not," the children cried. "It's like a fire," she said, "in the stove." "You're lying. You don't remember." Okay, hold on. Before we go any further, we need to look at the way that the sun is described. Standardly, a lemon, a flower, yellow, that's very much the way that we kind of teach little kids about how the sun looks. Instead, completely changing all of that, Margot describes the sun as copper, a penny, as a stove turning on. So the red and orange, powerful imagery here. Bradbury does this on purpose. He also does that to tell us something. If the sun looks like that, if the sun is supposed to look the way that this girl says that the sun looks, then very obviously this is in a future. Well beyond past when the sun is yellow and has started to die down, has started to get bigger, arguably. The sun is older than it is for us. If the sun is older than it is for us, then not only is it a future that we don't want, but this is a future that is terrifying. So, let's go back. But she remembered and stood quietly apart from all of them and watched the patterning windows. And once, a month ago, she had refused to shower in the school shower rooms, had clutched her hands to her ears over her head, screamed like the water mustn't touch her head. So after that, dimly, she sensed it. She was different, and they knew her difference and kept away. There was talk that her father and mother were taking her back to Earth next year. It seemed vital to her that they do so, though it would mean the loss of thousands of dollars to her family. And so the children hated her for all of the reasons big and little consequence. They hated her pale snow face, her waiting silence, her thinness, and her possible future. Alright, so I already brought up what Ray Bradbury was alluding to. He was very softly explaining how different she was. Here, on the other hand, on the complete other hand, we actually see the way that he just heavy hands this girl is different. This girl is different, and it pains her. It hurts her very much. With that, if she's going to go home, if she's going to come back to Earth, then these children are even more angry at her. And it's of no fault of her own. It's of no fault of theirs. It's just a need. A need to be happy. And these kids have been given this happiness and this freedom, but now, or I should say, they have this standard happiness and freedom that comes from a life in almost captivity. A life by themselves, hidden from the rain. She, on the other hand, has been free to feel the sun, to see the outside. This is a heavy-handed metaphor used by Bradbury to kind of have commentary, not just for us, on these kids and needing to see the sun, but also on someone being free and no longer being able to. "Get away!" The boy gave her another push. "What are you waiting for?" Then, for the first time, she turned and looked at him. And what she was waiting for was in her eyes. "Well, don't wait around here," cried the boy savagely. "You won't see nothing." Her lips moved. "Nothing!" he cried. "It was all a joke, wasn't it?" He turned to the other children. "Nothing's happened today, is it?" They all blinked at him, and then, understanding, laughed and shook their heads. "Nothing! Nothing!" "Oh, but..." Margot whispered, her eyes helpless. "But this is the day. The scientists predict... They say they know. The sun..." "All a joke," said the boy, and seized her roughly. "Hey, everyone, let's put her in a closet before the teacher comes." "No," said Margot, falling back. They surged about her, caught her up and bore her, protesting and then pleading and then crying, back into a tunnel, a room, a closet, where they slammed and locked the door. They stood looking at the door and saw it tremble from her beating and throwing herself against it. They heard her muffled cries, then, smiling, they turned and went out and back down the tunnel, just as the teacher arrived. "Ready, children?" She glanced at her watch. "Yes," said everyone. "Are we all here?" "Yes." Oh. The rain slacked still more. They crowded to the huge door. The rain stopped. It was as if, in the midst of a film concerning an avalanche, a tornado, a hurricane, a volcanic eruption, something had first gone wrong with the sound apparatus, thus muffling and then finally cutting off all noise. All of the blasts and repercussions and thunders, and then, second, ripped the film from the projector and inserted in its place a beautiful tropical slide, which did not move or tremor. The world ground to a standstill. The silence was so immense and unbelievable that you felt your ears had to be stuffed, or you had lost your hearing altogether. The children put their hands to their ears. They stood apart. The door slid back, and the smell of the silent, waiting world came into them. There is a reason, a very good reason, why here Bradbury uses a very specific word. He uses the word repercussions because he wants you to think. He wants you, the reader, to think of possible repercussions. Repercussions not only means this explosion and thunder and reactions to the constant barrage of the rain, but also, what are these kids going to have to deal with the moment the teacher figures out that she's locked in the closet? Or are they? Is the teacher going to figure it out? The sun came out. It was the color of flaming bronze, and it was very large, and the sky around it was a blazing blue tile color. And the jungle burned with sunlight as the children, released from their spell, rushed out, yelling into the springtime. "Now, don't go too far," called the teacher after them. "You've only got 2 hours. You wouldn't want to get caught out." But they were running, and turning their faces up to the sky, and feeling the sun in their cheeks like a warm iron. They were taking off their jackets and letting the sun burn their arms. "Oh, it's better than the sun lamps, isn't it? Much, much better." They stopped running and stood in the great jungle that covered Venus. That grew and never stopped growing, tumultuously, even as you watched it. It was a nest of octopi, cluttering up great armfuls of flesh-like weave, wavering, flowering in this brief spring. It was the color of rubber and ash, this jungle. From the many years without sun, it was the color of stones and white cheeses and ink. It was the color of the moon. Bradbury, one more time here, to break apart for a second, shows us the uniquely alienness of this jungle that is showing up in this story. The way that he describes it as this jungle that never stops growing, and just as soon as the sun comes out, it just latches out its fingers and its tendrils of branches and of roots, and just takes as much sun into itself as it possibly can. And because of how dark it is, it doesn't get the same colors as here on Earth. It is black and gray, rubber and ash, charcoal. It's all of these dark, pained colors. It's the things that we instantaneously see as lifeless, colors that we see as nothingness, as industrial in our lives. It's the color of concrete mixed with like asphalt. It's purposed. He wants to show you not just how alien this concept of Venus is and should be to us, but also how alien this forest is to these children. They are losing themselves in this brief 2-hour period of sun. And Margot's still locked in the closet. The children lay out laughing on the jungle mattress, and they heard it sigh and squeak under them, resilient and alive. They ran among the trees, they slipped and fell, they pushed each other, they played hide and seek and tag, and most of all, they squinted into the sun until the tears ran down their faces. They put their hands up to that yellowness and that amazing blueness, and they breathed of the fresh air, and listened to the silence which suspended them in a blessed sea of no sound and no motion. This is what's called an oxymoron. They're listening to silence. You can't listen to silence. Silence is the absence of sound. Therefore, instantaneously, you can't possibly hear it. You can't listen to nothing. And yet we do. We as humans, we do. They looked at everything and savored everything. Then, wildly, like animals escaped from their caves, they ran in shouting circles. They ran for an hour and did not stop running. And then, in the midst of their running, one of the girls wailed. Everyone stopped. The girl, standing in the open, held out her hand. "Oh, look, she said, trembling. They came slowly to look at her opened palm. In the center of it, cupped and huge, was a single raindrop. She began to cry. Looking at it, they glanced quietly at the sun. Notice Bradbury is on purpose trying to make you stop. Every time a paragraph like this happens, this stopping motion that's not dialogue, that doesn't quickly hit into one another, this everyone stopped, all of these periods that are being brought out, they are to stop you. I'm reading it this way because it's the way that he would have wanted you to hear it. There are pauses, very powerful pauses. Continuing. Oh no. A few cold drops fell on their noses and their cheeks and their mouths. The sun behind a stir of mist. A wind blew cold around them. They turned and started to walk back toward the underground house, their hands at their sides, their smiles vanishing away. A boom of thunder startled them, and like leaves before a new hurricane, they tumbled upon each other and ran. This image is great. Lightning struck 10 miles away, 5 miles away, a mile, a half mile. The sky darkened into midnight in a flash. They stood in the doorway of the underground for a moment until it was raining hard. Then they closed the door and heard the gigantic sound of the rain falling in. Tons and avalanches everywhere and forever. Will it be 7 more years? Yes, 7. Then one of them gave a little cry. Margot! What? She's still in the closet where we left her. We locked her. Margot. They stood as if someone had driven them, like so many stakes, into the floor. They looked at each other and then looked away. They glanced out out at a world that was raining now and raining steadily. They could not meet each other's glances. Their eyes were solemn and pale. They looked at their hands and feet, their faces down. Okay, if you want to show people feel bad about something, this paragraph is perfect. It is a masterpiece of showing regret and resentment. What were those repercussions going to be? These repercussions that were brought up earlier. It's right here. This is it. They know. They made fun of her. They hated her because she had what they didn't. And now, the moment that they can actually understand what the sun is, the moment that they can actually understand how this pained them, how this moment of loss hit them, they realize that they have stolen it from her. They have stolen that happiness that they just felt. They truly understand, as people often do after they've done something terribly wrong. They finally understand what it means, what they've done, what they've taken away from someone who is just trying to be happy. And now it's over. Margot. One of the girls said, Well? No one moved. Go on, whispered the girl. They walked slowly down the hall in the sound of cold rain. They turned through the doorway to the room in the sound of the storm and the thunder, lightning on their faces, blue and terrible. They walked over to the closet door slowly and stood by it. Behind the closet door was only silence. They unlocked the door, and even more slowly, and let Margot out. That is Ray Bradbury's. That is Ray Bradbury's All Summer in a Day. I've been Mr. Delaney, giving you my little commentary as I can. The assignment for my class, for the rest of you, if somehow you've decided to listen to this and you are not in my homeroom or in my 8th grade class, I'm very confused. The assignment has already been put up on Classroom. So I hope you listened. And I hope you learned I hope you learned what this actually means.